for the Charles Schwab Challenge. When it comes to the bucket system, if you want to follow along with me, what I would suggest to do, check the link of the video. That'll get you to the cheat sheet. And then on the cheat sheet, you can go down to the bucket system. From here, go ahead, put up the filter called the bucket system on, obviously, the bucket system. And then you can follow along with me while I go through this. We're going to go bucket by bucket, go over each of the projections of golfers I think are going to be inside the top 10 from each bucket. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. But I'm going to go ahead and hide some of these columns from my sheet. That way it doesn't confuse you. Go ahead and hide up to here. I don't want to clear them. Good thing there's a back button. Okay, so what I would suggest doing, go right into the stat filter, clear everything out, and we're going to look at last year buckets. When it comes to last year buckets for the Charles Schwab Challenge, what this is really truly saying, does a finish here from last year matter? And if so, you know, does it matter if they missed the cut? Does it matter if they got a top 20? This is what these buckets will tell us what we need to know. So when it comes to the last year one bucket, which are golfers who top 20 this event the year before, we have a 100% frequency rate of finishing inside the top 10. That's huge. That's always good to know. We have a minimum of a 1 and a max of 5. So we've had up to 5 golfers from this bucket inside the top 10 one of the years. At least one of the years. Could be more, but at least one. Now, the success rate isn't super high. 12% isn't super high. But I think we've had a lot of years. Actually, no, 12% seems pretty low. If I'm being honest, like sometimes we see 20%, but we have our projection higher. Now, partly that might have to do with the strength of field points that go towards it. 35% of the strength of field points are going towards this bucket, meaning there's some good golfers in here. I think Sky Scheffler's in here. Jordan Spieth is in here. We can look at some of these golfers, but the projection is 1 to 3. Now, one way to kind of like check the numbers, like try to find a more conservative number is looking at this column here. I have it on my sheet. You're not going to have it on yours. But as long as this is still around the range that this max projection is, all things are the same. So 1 to 3 is what I project to be inside the top 10. Let's take a look at our last year one golfers. Again, if you're following along with me, go to the dream sheet, put a filter on there. And what we're going to do is go to the last year filter, one that says LY, clear that out and select one, last year one. It's a limited group, limited bucket. We only have 14 golfers in it. The projections 1 to 3 are going to be inside the top 10. Now you just watched, if you're watching the preview video, you just watched me go over the review of the PGA Championship. I'm sure if you follow along with me long enough, you've seen this enough, where every single week that we review the bucket system, it's damn near 100% correct every single time. So when I tell you there's 1 to 3 golfers from this bucket that will finish inside the top 10, again, it's a projection, can't be definitive and say will, but I'm just going to call it as I see it. 1 out of 3 of these guys are going to finish inside the top 10. You're going to want to start here. Anchor your lineups around one of these guys. Don't try to get cute. It's probably going to be Scheffler, Finau, or Spieth. And it might be a combination of 2 of them that finish inside the top 10. Now, can you roster 2 of those guys? Maybe not. Maybe not. That's always a piece that we have to remember and consider when building our lineups. Can we build a lineup with 2 to 3 of these guys? Well, if it's Scheffler and Finau, no, you can't. But I would argue even if you start with Scheffler, you could still get to Spieth and build a lineup from there that's probably going to be pretty competitive. And we'll see what it does with the buckets or with the optimizer when I build lineups to see how good of a lineup we can build with a Scheffler Spieth start. But I think you could make the you could make the argument that if you do start Scheffler, don't put Finau or Spieth in your lineup. Go lower than that. And I would almost make the argument, if you're going to go Scheffler, the first golfer I see that I want to pair Scheffler up with would be Cam Davis. Now, that's starting 11K going down to 8K, which I think is fine. I think that's fine. Maybe you're not okay with that. Maybe you want to go Jordan Spieth, Cam Davis. I think that's fine as well. I mean, we just went over the pass optimal and GPP. The pass optimal and GPP winning laps. Weird. Had a little brain skip there. We just went over that and found out a lot of 11K golfers finish inside the top 10 as well as top 5 and have been in the optimal lineup. I think a majority of the time. If I can remember, I have a really bad short-term memory, but I think what I remember correctly is at least 2 out of 5 years, if not 3 out of 5 years, we saw an 11K golfer inside the top 5. So I'm okay with playing Scheffler. This will be his 3rd week in a row, by the way, which also I don't think is going to be that intensive on him. He's young, 26 years old. I think he's going to be just fine. But if you wanted to play that narrative, you got more golfers to choose from. Now, the rule is don't go over 3. Just don't. I don't think there's a purpose for it or a reason. And again, when we reviewed the PGA Championship, I showed you the sweet spot process, which follows the bucket rules very, very strictly. We beat a GPP. We beat the Millie Maker lineup by a decent amount. I mean, 14 points, say whatever you want, but it was a low-scoring DraftKings tournament. 515 was the optimal lineup. We've seen 780 and 800 points being the optimal lineup in other tournaments. 700, like 650 to 700 is probably going to be average, but this was 515, low 500, and your GPP winning, the Millie Maker, scored 474, something like that. The Sweet Spot Optimal scored 488. So I think following the Sweet Spot process, don't go over 3. Even if you like 4 of these guys, just don't put them together. It's a simple rule, it's simple to follow. Just don't do it. Let's move on. I don't want to spend a lot of time on some of these buckets, but the ones that are important, I want to spend the most time on. That makes sense. Last year 2s. The projection that you see on the screen is 1 to 3. You're going to see that on the cheat sheet. What you're not going to see is this max projection over here is less than 2. Remember, I always round up with max projections. So the fact that this isn't over 2, this to me automatically brings the minimum here down to 0. Although it says 1, I'm dropping it down to 0, but I am keeping this max projection of 3. So really this bucket is 0 to 3. Let's take a look at the golfers here. And again, if you're following along with me, you just go into the last year bucket, make sure everything's deselected, and then just only select 2. So here's where I would say, okay, so yes, the projection's 0 to 3, but look at who's at the top. You got Victor Hovland, Colin Morikawa, Max Homa, Tommy Fleetwood, and we'll just stop there. I like Denny McCarthy, but I'm not going to put him in the same conversation as those other 4 golfers. You have those 4, the likelihood of one of those not finishing inside the top 10, pretty low. However, we could, I think Victor Hovland is the choice to make here, but we could poke holes in Colin Morikawa's game. We could poke holes in Max Homa's game. And during the course, kind of the course preview that I had, one of the holes, just one, like I'm cherry picking here, one of the holes doesn't suit Tommy Fleetwood. That's the first hole, the par 5. Doesn't suit Tommy Fleetwood. It'd be interesting to see if he gets an eagle out of it, but I don't know. I'm not sure if I see it. But that would be the only hole that I would really poke in Tommy Fleetwood's game. I do like Tommy Fleetwood here. And then the rest of the guys are interesting to consider. I think there are some decent 7K plays. I like them all, honestly. I like Kitayama. I like Smalley. I like Rogers. I don't mind Beau Hosler. He's from Texas. Ryan Palmer. I think I'll play. My dummy lineup, by the way, now that I think of it, has Victor Hovland in it, Kurt Kitayama, and Ryan Palmer. And I mean, the projection's 0 to 3, but seeing that, I might change my Kitayama to someone else. I do like Victor Hovland, though. I think that's where I want to start most of my lineups is Victor Hovland. I do like Scotty Scheffler, and everything we just saw in the last year one bucket kind of is now leaning me towards Scotty Scheffler. Anyways, 0 to 3 to this bucket I think is pretty solid. I mean, it gives me a pretty wide range of success, so that might be kind of off-putting. But I do like at least one of these guys being inside the top 10. But not more than 3. I don't think there will be more than 3. So again, if you're building lineups, again, it's why I love the bucket system. It's giving you rules. Don't go over 3. You can I can see this from each one of you. I can see you like more than 3 guys on the screen. Don't play more than 3. Find the 3 that you want to anchor your lineups around, or put them in a player pool, and that's it. Don't play anyone else. So that's our last year 2s. Let's take a look. What else do we need to see? Last year 3, by the way, 0 to 2 is your projection there. Remember, that is all. There has to be a 2-point buffer between the minimum and the maximum, always. So because the minimum is 0, that automatically means the max is 2. Same applies for the last year 4s. So when you're looking at this on the spreadsheet, you know what to look for. The next 2 buckets, well, actually, no. The next bucket is the last year 5. These are golfers who missed the cut last year. The projection's 1 to 3. However, my conservative projection over here isn't over 2. It's 1.99, really close to 2. But that means this is also a 0 out of 3 bucket, which is really interesting. Let's take a look at who our missed cut golfers are from last year. Any notables? Justin Rose, Tom Hoagie, Min-Woo Lee, K.H. Lee, Brian Harmon, Steven Yeager, and Taylor Moore, all 8K and above. The fact this is a 0 to 3 bucket, I like a lot. There are some really good names, even lower than that. Because, like, I don't mind playing a Brian Harmon, no issue there. I also don't mind playing a Min-Woo Lee, a Justin Rose. I really like Justin Rose this week, by the way. So I don't mind playing him. Hayden Buckley seems like a good play as well. Maverick McNeely, I think, is on the mend. I think he's been playing a little bit better. I wouldn't mind going to someone like him. We've got a lot of good 6K golfers to pick from. I should say a lot of good 6Ks, but good names nonetheless. Adam Schenk, sure. Nate Lashley, by the way, I don't know why I didn't highlight him. Nate Lashley, solid 6K player. Adam Schenk, solid 6K player. I don't mind Higo. I don't mind Streelman. Probably stay away from Ryder. The rule is you play Patton Kizzire in Texas, I think. So no issue playing Patton Kizzire. Piercy, Sig, those are guys I don't mind putting like 1 or 2 in 1 or 2 lineups. That's probably it. Kramer Hickok, by the way, University of Texas guy. If you want to do the Texas narrative, remember we covered this in the course information. Data points. Maybe you look at all the Texas guys playing in Texas, and if their average finishing position is lower than their baseline, maybe give them a little bit of a boost. So maybe that's Hickok. I have not done that research, so I'm not telling you that's what I see. If you have access to that research, check it out. And if it works out, then play them. If not, then don't. You know, I think Hickok is like a borderline guy to play. He's the stone min at 6K. He's going to allow you to do some things with some lineups. And being a Texas guy, I don't think it's terrible. So that's your last year 5s. And of course, if we remember correctly, last year 6s would be 1 to 3 as your projection. Some good names here. These are golfers who did not play last year. This includes golfers who have 0 course history, by the way. Which you can see a lot of these guys here have no course history. But I'll leave that up to you who you think would be the right plays. Siwoo Kim, I don't mind. Russell Henley, I think, is a good course fit here. Benny Ann, no issues there. Harris English. I like this price tag for Harris English a lot. $7,800. Maybe that's who I'll switch from Kitayama. Yeah, I'll probably do that. Kitayama down to Harris English. That would make the most sense. So anyways, 1 to 3 from this bucket. And that wraps up your last year buckets. So we move on to the next ones. Now, again, if you're following along with me, all you'd want to do to get to the last week buckets, clear everything out and select last week. That way we get to these projections and you can follow along with me on the cheat sheet just by going to the link in the description, finding that sheet, then putting this filter on, the bucket system filter. This is really interesting when it comes to projections. If we look at the top two and the bottom two, they're about the same. They're almost mirror images of each other. 1 to 3, and then look at this over here. So we're basically trying to figure out, does it matter playing at the PGA Championship last week? Or just the week before this event, any given year? Doesn't matter if it's a PGA Championship before it or any other event. We're looking at all the success rates. PGA Championship has a little bit more importance stamped with it than other events that happened before the Charles Schwab. Like if I go to 2019, we had the PGA Championship. 2018 was the Byron Nelson. 2017 was the Byron Nelson. 2016 was the Byron Nelson. 2015 was the Wells Fargo Championship. 2014 was the Byron Nelson. And 2013 was the Byron Nelson. So I guess what we could do, yeah, sure, why don't we do this? Okay. The PGA Championship started in 2019, being the tournament right before the Charles Schwab Challenge. Now, 2020, that was its own thing too, by the way. I won't even have last week's stats for that because there were no last week events. So we want to look at 2019, 2021, and 2022. We want to be very specific with this because does the Byron Nelson equate? Like, is it the same significance as the PGA Championship? Of course it's not. Now, here's one thing I will note first before we even get into that. If you want to use all the data for every single week that led into the Charles Schwab Challenge, or whatever the tournament was called at the Colonial Country Club, if you want to, everything you see on the screen right now is exactly what you want to look at. So our projections are very conservative. 1 to 3 last week ones. Those are your top 20 finishers at the PGA Championship. 1 to 3 last week twos. This is very close right here. Let me see if I... Oh, it's actually below 2, technically. So, okay, that's great. Last week ones. 1 to 3 is your projection. Last week fives. Guys who missed the cut last week, by the way, in a good bucket to select from, 1 to 3. We also actually technically have 1 to 3 last week twos, which is that 20 to 40 range, as well as golfers who did not play at the PGA Championship. That's also 1 to 3 when it comes to these projections. But when we bring into the conservative projection, these drop below 2, meaning the mins, the actual projection for these buckets, you know, we're looking at this one and this one are 0 to 3, just like we did with the last year buckets. However, let's go ahead, let's dig a little bit deeper and see what we can find with the buckets. So here's where the engine occurs. This is what's being pulled on that little summary sheet that I have for you. The bucket system comes from here. So we're going to be looking at the last week bucket right here, and we want to look at 2019 and forward. You can see in 2020, there were, I don't have buckets for. Like, there's no point in looking at whatever happened the week before. There was no event the week before in 2020. That was coming back from COVID. Charles Schwab Challenge was the first event on the schedule. Everything else, though, is the PGA Championship. PGA Championship was the week before. So 1, 1, 3. That means 100% of golfers who finished, I should say 100% of golf. I'm sorry. We have 100% frequency of at least one golfer who finished inside the top 20 the week before at the PGA Championship, mind you, finishing inside the top 10 of the Charles Schwab Challenge. That's how this reads. At least one every single year. But we did have 3 in 2022. So if we go back to the dream sheet, again, if you're following with me on the cheat sheet, you just go to the dream sheet portion of it. Make sure we have no other filters on. Let's go ahead and clear out the last week buckets and just select one. So remember, we have at least one golfer every single year that the PGA Championship has preceded the Charles Schwab Challenge of producing a top 10 finisher at the Charles Schwab Challenge. And if I didn't already say this, short-term memory, sometimes as streamers we black out when we talk. Golfers who top 20 at the PGA Championship. That's what we're talking about. At least one of them has finished inside the top 10 of the Charles Schwab Challenge every year that the PGA Tour or the PGA Championship has preceded this event. So, take your pick. We have Scheffler, Hovland, Rose, Fleetwood, Davis, Minwoo Lee, Kitayama, Eric Cole, Sepp Straka, and Michael Block. We're not playing Michael Block. Just don't do it. Great story, heartwarming story. Don't play him. Just don't play him. You'll thank me later. The rest of these guys, though, very much in play. And I really don't care which one you choose. You just have to make a choice. Out of the 9 golfers you see, I do think we'll see at least one. I mean, the projections are telling us it's 1 to 3 from this bucket. 1 to 3 inside the top 10. So if you wanted to start Scotty Scheffler, Justin Rose, Cam Davis, which I think is it's a beautiful start. Start there. You have your 3 max golfers that you can put in that might hit the optimal lineup. That's the projection, finish inside the top 10. Now, if you don't like that, if that's a little too close to the max, then you just take one of these guys out. I already said starting with Scotty and Cam Davis seems like a pretty good plan. So that wouldn't be terrible. Also, if you want to start Hovland, that seems like a good idea too. Kind of really liking the Scotty, Rose, Cam Davis start though. But that would be your max projection for this bucket. So keep that in mind. The other one that was 1 to 3 are golfers who missed the cut last week. There were 27 of them. Why don't we go ahead and talk about those? I'm not going to talk about the rest of them. Just remember last week 2s, your projection 0 to 3. Last week 6s, your projection also 0 to 3. Maybe you toy around with... Actually, hold the thought. Let's go ahead and actually take a look at last week 2s. I think that's going to be important because this is your 20 to 40 finish. I'm sure we're going to see some good golfers in this bucket. Yeah. Colin Morikawa, Jordan Spieth, Chris Kirk, Denny McCarthy, KH Lee. Those are all your AK and above golfers. Remember the projection's 0 to 3. It's a little... Actually, why don't we go ahead and go back to the buckets too to see... Okay. So we had 4 in 2022 that finished inside the top 10 here. 3 inside... 3 in 2021 that finished inside the top 10, and then 0 in 2019. So that's interesting. So it's not a for sure thing. And again, our projection is 0 to 3. However, looking at the golfers in this bucket, I think we're going to get at least 1. And I wouldn't go more than 2. I'm really not feeling more than 2. So I think 1 is fine. When I build the optimizer for this week, I'll put the projection 0 to 3. For mine though, the copy that I'm gonna make for myself, I'm gonna put 0 to 2. I don't want to toy around with 3 of them, and if there ends up being 3 or more, so be it. That's fine. But yeah, it's good that we looked at this bucket. It's an important one to look at. Now the last one, golfers who did not play. Yeah. We have 7K golfers and above. Everyone else is 6K and below. So do with that as you will. 1 to 3 is a projection here. Yeah, I'd also stick around 1 or 2. I wouldn't go to 3. But it might be your glue. It might help you build lineups. So actually, let's put it a different way. I think if you grab 3 golfers from this bucket, you got to put a rule in there that 2 of them have to be 6K golfers, and then 1 of them has to be one of these 7K golfers. You do not put 3 6K golfers in your lineup. You just don't do it. Don't do it. Also, these 7K golfers are a little suspect to double up and put in your lineups. I guess I don't mind it. Yeah, I mean, I can make the argument of doing like S.H. Kim or Byung-Hun An. Like, you could actually put those 2 together, or you could maybe go like Benny Ann, Norman, or Vincent Norman, or even Will Gordon. I like Will Gordon, so I don't mind, maybe starting this way. And then if you also wanted to grab a 6K golfer, Nate Lashley, Ben Martin, whoever it is, I think that's how you can get to 3. So, but I don't think you do 3 6Ks. And I also don't think you do 3 7Ks. Just the numbers aren't in your favor. The odds are not in your favor. So that covers your last week bucket. The next one I want to look at are the course history buckets. So this really is since 2013, looking at every single top 10 finish, does course history matter? And I have them in ranges 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, 80 plus, and did not play. Like, just have not played. First time seeing the course. I said 0 to 20, I mean 1 to 20. I don't want to confuse anybody. It's, you know, a win or up to 20th place. In these buckets, believe it or not, we actually have a 100% frequency rate when it comes to course history ones. Having really, really good course history. 100% frequency rate. Now, I used to use that. I used to use these min-maxes as rules. Like, you want at least one and no more than two. Until I realized, you know, I should probably look at how many golfers are in the bucket this year versus what we see on average, which we have less than 5. I also like to look at the strength of field points. That's what actually goes into the projections. So this read is actually 0 to 2, but for all those superstitious people out there, 100% frequency rate, which means at least one of these guys has been inside the top 10 every single year. If we want to take a look at those guys, again, you go to the dream sheet from the cheat sheet. Again, link in the description. Make sure you clear out all the filters. And by clearing out all the filters, that means you select everything or you remove the conditionals that you have. So we'll do that. And then you go in here to the course history bucket. You clear all of those ones out and you select one. So we have 4 golfers: Tony Finau, Collin Morikawa, Jordan Spieth, and Davis Riley. The projection is 0 to 2 technically. I wouldn't select more than one. I don't mind starting with Tony Finau. I don't mind starting with Morikawa. I don't mind starting with Spieth. And I also don't mind putting Davis Riley in my lineups as like a glue piece. I always think of 7K golfers as glue. They hold up our 10K golfers with our 6K golfers. So I don't mind, you know, playing someone like Davis Riley. However, if I'm going to select one, it's most likely not going to be him unless I start my lineups with Scheffler or Hovland. I think that's the only way I get to Davis Riley. Otherwise, I'm not playing Davis Riley with any of these guys here. The projection technically is 0 to 2, so you could. But I've seen it enough times. I'm going to play the numbers. I'm going to play the odds. I'm not going to. Just one of these guys. And quite frankly, other than Spieth, the other two weren't really in my... I wasn't really thinking about starting my lineups there anyways. So, it's fine. Let's take a look at the other projections. So it's pretty even, actually. Course history 4 through 6, the projections are 0 to 2. I don't really care to look at those ones. We'll just keep our eyes on course history 2 and 3. But just remember, any of the other buckets, course history 4, 5, and 6, you want a max of 2. Just keep that in mind. So the next one we're going to look at, course history 2s. 1 to 3 is the projection. Again, you can see that here. 100% frequency rate. We've seen at least once every year, up to 7 times. 7 golfers have been inside the top 10 from this bucket in 1 year. So if we take a look at our course history 2s, just go back in that course history bucket, filter, and go to 2. Remember, it's 1 to 3. And very interesting because I really like Cam Davis. I know a lot of people do this week. I also really like Victor Hovland. The projection's 1 to 3. I have no issue starting with those two. And in fact, I also have no issue starting with Rose as well. This is the second time that I'd hit the limit of 3, which kind of scares me in a way, but I'm also okay with it as well. I'm really liking either starting, like, I want to start with a 10K golfer, whether that's Scheffler, whether that's Hovland. It's probably just those two. And then I want a 9K golfer in my lineup. And I really like Rose and Fleetwood. I also really like Cam Davis, so going 10-9-8, 10-9-8 starting there seems kind of simple this week for me. And that's probably where I'm going to be building a lot of my lineups that way. I think that's totally fine. We'll see how it goes, though, when it comes to building lineups. It might be impossible. It might be absolutely perfect. Who knows? But, again, the projection's 1 to 3 from this bucket. Go to the next one, course history 3s. Our projection is 1 to 4. And that matches also with our max projections here. 100% frequency rate. I think finding a golfer from this bucket, I wouldn't say it's going to be easy, but I think we're going to have at least one from here. And I mean, Scotty Scheffler's right at the top. It's pretty easy to start there. We also have Max Homa. I'll play one lineup with the Max Homa in it. That's it. Maybe I'll put 1 to 4, 1 to 5 lineups because I like to kind of mix my 10Ks with 9Ks. You know, we'll see how it goes. But that's about as much Max Homa exposure I'm going to have. Sung J M, I guess I don't really mind. He's 4th in my model, which we'll talk about tomorrow, but it's not terrible. And you could start Scotty and then Sung J. You could. Again, this projection here is 1 to 4. Henley seems like a fun play. Hoagie seems like I should say a good play. I like Harris English a lot. Again, it's up to 4. I don't mind starting there, getting 4. Outside of that, yeah, mix and match. I think that's fine. 1 to 4. I let the optimizer do all the work for me. And I obviously anchor my lineups with certain golfers. Most likely going to be anchoring them with Scotty. But I like golfers from the other buckets. Remember Rose, remember Fleetwood, Cam Davis. Those are guys I wouldn't mind starting with there. And then maybe the optimizer selects 1 or 2 guys outside of Scotty here. I think that'd be fine. So that wraps up the course history buckets. Again, course history 4, 5, and 6. That's on you guys. Check out the cheat sheet. Remember the projections are 0 to 2. You want to select somewhere between 0 to 2 golfers there, if you can. And then recent form buckets. We'll go here. We've got 2 more to go after this: salaries and strokes gained buckets. These are the core 4 though. Last year, last week, course history, and now recent form. So does having really good recent form coming into this tournament matter? Recent form 1 means you have an average finishing position inside the top 20 over the last 7 weeks. And I shouldn't even say it that way. Your average finishing position is 20th place or better over the last 7 weeks. So with that, projections technically 1 to 2, but with the sweet spot rules, it's 0 to 2. We have 6 golfers in that bucket, by the way, where we normally see around 4. I think I have a good idea who that is. So again, these are your recent form buckets. Go to recent form 1. Scotty Scheffler, Justin Rose, Tommy Fleetwood, Denny McCarthy, Vincent Norman, and Michael Block. I'm not playing Michael Block. The projection's 0 to 2. I gave you 3 golfers that I liked. I liked Scheffler, Rose, and Fleetwood. So if you already had it in your head that you wanted to start Scheffler, Rose, Fleetwood, don't do it. Now, to me, it's really a choice between Rose or Fleetwood. I think, I like Scotty, but if I was being a contrarian in my brain, I could skip past Scheffler and make sure I have 100% exposure to either Justin Rose or Tommy Fleetwood as just one guy in my lineups. And then maybe I just sprinkle in, McCarthy or Norman in some of the other ones. Again, I'm not doing Michael Block. Again, wonderful story last week, just not putting him in my lineups. But yeah, if you're not doing Scheffler, I think the play here is load up on Rose and Fleetwood. I don't think there's a 100% frequency rate here. 66.67%. Never see more than 1 in the optimal lineup from this bucket, so that might be something worth consideration, by the way. I guess I don't know. 0 to 2 is fine. I'm definitely just doing I'm doing 1, I think, for sure. Because I like Scheffler, I like Rose, and I like Fleetwood. But usually the buckets give you a warning. When you see 0 to 2, it means, hey, not a strong bucket to consider. Or not so much a strong bucket to consider, but more so like, be careful. Okay, moving on to the next one. Recent form 2s. This is where a high projection is. It's 1 to 4. that is what our bucket projection is. And taking a look, recent form twos, again, projections 1 to 4. Finau, Hovland, Spieth, Sung JM, Chris Kirk. Those are all your guys 9K and above. We do have a bunch of 8K golfers, so the projection of 1 to 4 seems pretty fitting. Lots of 8K and above golfers. Definitely one of them, one of those guys from 8K and above will be inside the top 10. I'm not sure exactly who that'll be. I think, oh man, there's a lot of good choices, honestly. I like Jordan Spieth. I also like Victor Hovland. I don't mind starting there. You know, the last bucket we were looking at, the recent form ones, well, maybe we don't go Scheffler. Maybe we start Hovland and then go to Rose, or Hovland Fleetwood. Also really like Cam Davis. I might have already figured out my lineups. I mean, my dummy lineup already has these guys in them, and I didn't even look at the bucket system. So last time that happened, scored a pretty healthy amount of points. I didn't win the GPP with that lineup, but it's a good starting point. Good, fun choices, man. I enjoy looking at the bucket system just because of this. The next projection is the exact same, by the way. Despite you seeing 2 to 4, this conservative projection over here is less than 3. So that rounds up to 3, meaning the minimum drops down to 1. You want a 2-point buffer. I always look at this to drop my minimum down. You want a 2-point buffer, so that 2.93 goes up to 3. The min automatically becomes 1. But instead of using this as my actual max projection, I'm using this, which is 4. So again, this is a 1 to 4 projection for recent form 3s. And it starts with Morikawa, Homa. You've got Burns and Siwoo. Those are your only 9K and above golfers, by the way. And actually, Hoagie is the only 8K golfer from this bucket. Most of these are your 7K golfers, which if I'm writing a narrative in my head, this is where we find our 7K golfers. So I just, more and more of me is telling, or more, the more I look at this, the more I'm getting really strong Victor Hovland, Cam Davis, Rose or Fleetwood starts, and then mixing in some of these 7Ks here. I think that's a beautiful way to start. We'll see what the optimizer tells us. I mean, Harris English seems like a really good play now. Like, I'm thinking of it for myself when it comes to what I know what my dummy lineup is versus what I'm seeing with the buckets and all the players. Really liking, again, it's a narrative written in my head. I'm producing it myself. I'm trying to write the story as I see it. Who knows if it's going to actually happen. Brendan Todd, by the way, a golfer that a lot of people are liking this week, is in this bucket. He's ranked really well, or he's rated really well in my model. I like him too. So I also wouldn't mind Brendan Todd. Remember, this is a 1 to 4 projection, so play up to 4 guys if you like them. No issues. Like Carson Young down here seems like a fun 6K play. Play Patton Kizzire in Texas. You got Dylan Wu here, who's everyone's favorite, you know, chronic 6K golfer that should actually be a 7K golfer. Lots of good plays. Lots of good plays from here. Remember, projection 1 to 3. And then the rest of the buckets in the recent forms are 0 to 2 or just probably 0. Like recent form 6, probably just 0. Recent form 5, that's also 0 to 2, but the projection's just miserable. Recent form 4 is 0 to 2 is the projection here. Let's just take a look really quick. Who are those guys? Minwoo Lee, Brian Harmon, Davis Riley. Okay, so 0 to 2 here, which is perfect. Each one of these guys can miss the cut real easy. So 0 to 2 seems like a really good projection. All right, that wraps up the recent form buckets. For the core 4, we'll go into salaries and we'll touch this briefly. So oh my God, I just looked at this is the first time I saw the projections. We went over the pass optimal and GPP winning lineups. We saw the 11K golfer inside the top 5 a ridiculous amount. Let's just actually count. So in 2017, we actually had 2 11K golfers, 11K and above golfers inside the top 10. Inside the top 2. Let's just say top 2. 2018, our 11K golfer was 5th. 10-6, by the way, he won the tournament. 2019, Jordan Spieth, 10-9. Did we have an 11K golfer? We might not have. We did. Justin Rose. Okay. Oh, we had a few. John Rahm even. Okay. So, hey, 2019 didn't really work out. This is also the first year the PGA Championship was the week before, so might be doing some foreshadowing. Jordan Spieth, by the way, finished 3rd in that PGA Championship. So if there's any concerns with, like fatigue for Scottie Scheffler finishing 2nd, going deep into the PGA Championship, well, there's Spieth at 10-9. He finished inside the top 10. 2020, we had no tournament beforehand. This was coming back from COVID, so this is probably just a weird one to look at. We'll just skip past this one. 2021. Hey, look, there's Jordo up there at the top of the leaderboard, 11,200. I would imagine he was one of the more expensive ones. Yeah, JT was 11. Was there anyone even more expensive than that? No. Nope. So Jordan was actually your most expensive guy at 11.2. Let's just double check that. I hate saying stuff that I'm not going to prove true. Yeah, Jordan Spieth, most expensive guy. He finished 30th, so he played all 4 rounds of the PGA. He had finished top 10 the year before. Take that for whatever it's worth. By the way, he played the 2 events leading into this one, just like Scheffler. Keep that in mind. That's also going to be Spieth's same thing this year. 2022, there's Scottie. Scottie had missed the cut the week before, so he got an extra 2 days to come here. He had also played 2 weeks heading into this. He'd missed the cut the year before, but still played pretty well. Hey, there's Jordan once again. Once again, with a 2nd place finish, a 34th, and then a 2nd the week before. Do we see that trend once again in 2023? We've got Spieth. Oh my goodness. He didn't play the week before. He didn't play the Byron. He actually played the Wells Fargo Championship. Top 20, 29th place. I mean, that looks like Jordan Spieth the last couple of years. Look at that. Same recent form, 30, 34th place. 2023, finished 29th at the PGA. Recent form was 30th. Here was a little bit better in 2021. Really good recent form, but a 30th place finish at the PGA. So that's, in 2021, that's a 30th place finish. In 2022, that's a 34th place finish. And in 2023, it's a 29th place finish. Is this the automatic Jordan Spieth top 10 week? It probably is, right? Most likely is. Wow. 2019, what did we have Jordan Spieth at? PGA, he actually was a 3rd place finish there. And the recent form was nearly the same. So this is peak Jordan Spieth season right now. How do we not play Jordan Spieth? Okay. Yeah, well, that's your 10K range to consider. That's something to consider. The projection is 1 to 4, or 1 to 3, by the way. And when I first started looking at this bucket here on stream with you guys, I was just like, I saw the numbers 1 to 3. We normally don't see that every single week. This is one of those weeks where starting with a 10K golfer is probably the important thing to do. And you could start Scheffler Spieth. You could start Hovland Spieth. I mean, any of those 10K golfers. Finau Spieth, Morikawa Spieth, Homa Spieth. I think that's fine. But it seems like an automatic Spieth week, honestly. I know he's got a hurt wrist, by the way, so keep that in mind. Everything else is minus the 7K range. 7, you want 1 to 3 golfers in there. Everything else is 0 to 2. So the 9K and the 8K range, your minimums are 1 technically, but the max projections aren't over 2. Even when you come to the conservative max projections, they're not over 2, which means you need a 2-point buffer between the max and the min. Because the max is 2, the min automatically has to be 0. However, these are good buckets to choose from. And it's 100% frequency rate of each one of these price ranges being inside the top 10 every single year. At least one of the golfers being inside the top 10 every year. So keep that in mind. 10-9-8-7. It seems like a good start. 10-9-8-7. Man, I'm just thinking about this. Like, here, let's take a look at 2023. When we've been going through these buckets, Scheffler shows up a bunch in the buckets that are easy to select from. Finau's in a couple bigger buckets with him and other 10K golfers. It might be easy to select Finau's. If you're one of those guys that's just like, well, yeah, I wouldn't play him with like, if I had to choose between him, Morikawa, and Homa, I'm going to choose Finau. Okay, that makes sense. I get it. Really like Hovland this week. So, like, to me, Scheffler and Hovland are easy starting points for me. When it comes to the 9K range, it is hard for me to choose between those three. Spieth, Rose, Fleetwood. I really like Rose. So I might actually do 30% of my lineup starting with Scheffler and Spieth, Rose, or Fleetwood. So it's going to start with Scheffler. And then, so let's just say 33% of my lineups will have Scheffler in them. Of those 33%, I'm going to split them into thirds. So I will have a third of my Scotty lineups having Spieth in them, a third of my Scotty lineups with Rose, and a third of my Scotty lineups with Fleetwood. So I'll do that. Like I said, I like him as a 10K golfer. I also like Hovland as a 10K golfer. I'm going to do the same thing with Spieth, Rose, and Fleetwood there. Then, with the remaining lineups, I'm probably going to start Jordan and Rose or Fleetwood. And you know, build down from there. This will be more of like a balanced build, but holy moly, looking at all these buckets and seeing that Spieth he's trending in the ways that he has trended before, finishing inside the top 10 for this event, hard to ignore. It is hard to ignore. Coming in with the same recent form, basically the damn near same finishing position at the PGA Championship the week before, and having a top 20 finish here the year before. All of these things point towards a Spieth top 10 once again. And if that's the case at $9,900, like, that seems like a slam dunk. Now, I think I'm going to leave some lineup builds not going with Jordan Spieth, because I do want to do Max Homa. Maybe I do a Max Homa Jordan, a Morikawa Jordan, a Finau Jordan. You know what? I figured it out. Well, can't say that. No, I think so. I think that's what we're going to do. And then I'm going to just build one lineup with each one of the other golfers that I'm not playing, throw those into some winner take alls, and just, you know, if those golfers hit, I just get my money back. If not, the golfers that I do like will win a lot of money. I think that's more for a strategy. I'm thinking out loud right now. That's more suited for strategy talk as opposed to preview talk. So let's move on with the last bucket. Actually, let's go for these projections really quick. 10K golfers, I'm projecting 1 to 3 to finish inside the top 10, meaning go ahead, take your fill of 10K golfers. You're going to be just fine. 0 to 2 9K golfers, 0 to 8K golfers, 1 to 3 7K, 0 to 2 high 6K, and 0 to 2 low 6K. My rules usually when it comes to the 6K range, don't play more than 2. And if you do play 2, never play 2 of the low 6Ks. You're either going to mix and match 1 high 6K with 1 low 6K, or you're going to double up on 2 high 6Ks. That's kind of my rule when it comes to the 6K range. Now we can move on to the strokes gained buckets. Now I do strokes gained a little different. If you want a better explanation of this, I do have a video on how I do the bucket system. You can check that out in the description below. I'm not going to fully explain this, but everything revolves around off the tee and putting. Strokes gained 1 is everything's positive. That's also approach and around the green. So positive off the tee, positive approach, positive around the green, and positive putting. Strokes gained 2 is positive putting and positive off the tee, with whatever stat in between. Could be negative approach, could be negative around the green, could be negative both of those, but positive off the tee and positive putting. Strokes gained 3 is positive off the tee, negative putting. Strokes gained 4 is negative putting, positive, or negative off the tee, positive putting. Strokes gained 5 is negative off the tee, negative putting, and then strokes gained 6 are just no strokes gained stats. So I look at a full calendar year, 365 days. That is how I measure the strokes gained stats. That's how I should say the strokes gained buckets are created. So when it comes to having all stats positive, these are your best golfers in the field, typically. 1 to 3 of those guys. So we can go ahead and take a look at this. Make sure, again, if you're using the cheat sheet, which you can find in the description, a link to the cheat sheet in the description of this video, make sure you have no filters on. And one easy way to do that is just to make sure you don't see a colored in, like if I were to select one, you see how this is colored in? You can also see there's less golfers, but this filter is different than the other filters you see. So you want to make sure that you have all of these. You'd want to select all in every single one to make sure you have every golfer. One other quick way to note this is basically select like column J. Column J is going to count this this cell as your count number, but we can see in the bottom right hand corner of your spreadsheet is a count if you go ahead and select this. Now what you could do is hold the control button and then left click name, and if you see 120 as your count, you've got all the golfers in the field you need to look at. Just that's my easy way to double check. So when it comes to these strokes gained buckets, everything is color coded by strokes gained stats. So go ahead and sort A to Z on this strokes gained bucket, and you can see all the dark green, that's our strokes gained 1. All the light green, strokes gained 2, and then so on and so forth. So 1 to 3 strokes gained 1 is what the projection is. And I'm actually going to open this up so it's the way you see it on yours. So 1 to 3. Well, you could start out with Finau. You could start out with Homa. I would rather start out with Jordan Spieth, believe it or not. He is a strokes gained 1 guy. And it's 1 to 3. Remember that? 1 to 3 is the projection. You could just leave it here. Or maybe like Ricky Fowler. Put Ricky Fowler in your lineups. That would work. Or anyone else. Maybe you want a Spieth and Sungjae lineup. Or a Spieth and Fleetwood lineup. Remember, we like Fleetwood. Why not go that way? So those are ways you could start, or you could fill in some of these other guys down here in your lineups as well. Strokes gained 2 is 0 to 2 as your projection. And then when we look at these guys, we've got Victor Hovland here, Sam Burns, Minwoo Lee. Remember, it's 0 to 2. My suggestion, don't play more than 2. If you wanted to play up to 2, that's fine. I mean, like doing a Hovland Burns lineup seems just fine. Maybe even like a Hovland and any of these guys down here would be just fine as well. 0 to 2 is pretty good. Strokes gained 3. This projection is actually 1 to 3. And that stays constant with the conservative projection over here. So 1 to 3 is the projection. We've got a few more golfers in this one than the other two that we just looked at. Scotty Scheffler is your main guy up top, but we also have Colin Morikawa, who is no slouch. Siwoo Kim seems like a very volatile play that could get you a lot of DraftKings points, so I don't mind that kind of choice. Russell Henley, I like. Cam Davis, my guy Cam Davis. For me, I think starting Scotty Scheffler, Cam Davis seems like the more I look at it, the more I see it, the more I fall in love with it. That's just what I like. That's what I want to do. But the rest of these guys are like Ryan Palmer as a fill-in. You know, like I think these 7K golfers are glue pieces to glue your 10Ks with your 6Ks. I love, you know, thinking that way with a bucket like this, because it's really easy to fall in love with Scheffler and Davis, but you could also sub out Davis and then select one of these 7K golfers, or even some of these 6K golfers. Remember, the projection is 1 to 4, right? 1 to 3. 1 to 3. My apologies. So I think that stays constant this week as well. Stroke chain 4, 1 to 3 as well. We just scroll down a little bit more, and look at that. We've got Justin Rose at the top. We got a lot of golfers in here, by the way. More than we typically see every single week. You've got Rose, McCarthy, Hoagie, Brendan Todd, Harris English. We've talked about those guys already before. Byron, Linda Hughes, favorite golfer, and Christian Bezainhout. He was just talking about him on his Rainmakers episode. I don't know if I'm going to go there with Bezainhout, but if there's one person to know anything about him, it would be Byron. So, hey, not a terrible choice there. Probably not going to talk a lot about the golfers here. I think they're fine to play, you know, somewhere between 5 to 7%. Like, I probably wouldn't go more than that. It's good to have some exposure to them, but not a lot. And then the other two bucket, or actually there's only one other bucket, the stroke chain 5. That's 0 to 2. And I wouldn't play more than that. Yeah. Patton Kazire seems like a pretty decent choice. Same with Dylan Wu. I'm not going any further than that, though. Actually, I shouldn't say it I shouldn't say it like that, but I would just only play one of these guys. And if you feel confident with one of them, so be it. That's fine. I think that works out. But that's going to cover the strokes game buckets, and more importantly, that covers the bucket system as a whole.